At this point of our journey, let's take a closer look at the course for obtaining a private aircraft pilot license. Each aeronautical course has two phases, the theoretical part and the practical part, with the related exams. In regards to the theoretical part of the course for the PPL license, private pilot license, the minimum amount required for the European authority is 100 hours of classroom lessons with programs covering 9 subjects. Regulation aeronautics, perhaps the most theoretical of them all, but necessary to know the legislation. General knowledge regarding aircraft, which explains their construction, systems, engines. Meteorology, which is one of the most beautiful subjects because it allows you to know how to read the sky. Navigation, which for lovers of geography, maps and compasses is wonderful. Principles of flight, to understand the forces that support an aircraft. Performance and planning, which teaches you how to prepare for a flight. Operating procedures, to know the limits that must be respected. Human factors and limitations, to know the human limits of flight. And finally, aeronautical radio telephony, to learn how to speak on the radio with a standard phraseology in your own language and in English, if you also want to fly abroad. Normally, a theoretical course lasts about 3 or 4 months, obviously depending on the frequency of the lessons. Classroom lessons can sometimes be substituted for remote lessons, i.e. distance learning, but the school must have specific approval and use certified platforms for this type of course. Lessons are held by theoretical instructors included in the school organisation chart, and these can be flight instructors, pilots, technicians or people who have specific skills in that subject, engineers, experts or flight controllers. During the lessons, progress tests are normally administered to check the progress of the student, and at the end of the course, you must pass the final theoretical exam. The theoretical exam costs about €100 and is valid for 2 years, within which you must also complete the entire practical part. It can be carried out in a flight school or in national authorities' headquarters. Now, let's move on to the practical part. Before starting to fly, it's necessary to be close to 16 years old because it's the age requirement for the first solo flight. To take the final exam, you must be at least 17 years old, as starting too early can run the risk of delaying the course too much. In addition, it is necessary to have a second-class medical examination certificate issued by a certified doctor. The school will give you a list of the closest doctors and you can book the appointment yourself. If you intend to go ahead with the commercial pilot license, we recommend that you obtain the first-class medical examination certificate directly, but we will also talk about this in the next tutorials. But here's the thing, you could actually start flying even without a medical certificate, because the commander on board is the instructor, and it is therefore he who must be entitled to fly a plane. However, all schools recommend that you visit before starting the course to avoid wasting money, for example, if you have some parameter that does not meet the requirements. Regarding further information on this topic, there will be a specific tutorial in a few lessons, so stand by. The minimum of flight hours that has to be carried out is 45, most of them to fly with the instructor and some alone. There are some students who take longer to be ready to fly alone and some who take less time. This doesn't mean anything in terms of ability. It's physiological. The important thing is that there is a continuous exchange with the instructors to understand if you are within the standards of the course. To plan the flight lessons, it is necessary to take into account that every hour is preceded by a briefing, which can be shorter or longer, depending on what you are going to try and do whilst in flight. It could last for more than an hour if you approach a maneuver for the first time, if you go for a navigation for which you need to plan, check the weather reports, call the airports to get the authorizations. It is also necessary to prepare the plane, refuel it, carry out the checks, put it in the flight line, etc. So, you must always be ahead of your presentation at the school. If there are any delays with respect to the start of your practice hour, read the flight manual or review the checklists. It never hurts. Remember that before going home after the flight, it is necessary to keep the time for the debriefing, which, as is the case here, will be longer or shorter depending on the mission that you just completed. The practical exam consists of a flight with a certified flight examiner to carry out exams. He is not an authority inspector, but rather an instructor pilot with a lot of experience, who perhaps flies in an airline or who is an instructor in another school and can act in the name of and on behalf of the authority. The examiner will not ask you to perform stunts or maneuvers that you are not able to do, but will simply evaluate you in all the maneuvers that you have tried over and over throughout the duration of the course. It will evaluate whether you are able to make decisions, manage emergencies, and solve problems. But the flight will be carried out in complete safety, putting you at ease. Relax, do what you're able to, and fly safely. As general timing, consider that between the theoretical and the practical part, it is always advisable to overlap the activities as much as possible. You cannot follow a whole theoretical course without having ever flown, because you would lose all the theory to be put into practice, which serves to consolidate concepts, as it could be counterproductive to fly too many hours without having first started the theoretical course. Some schools require you to start practicing only after starting the theory, while others are more flexible because, in fact, for the first few hours of flight, you don't need theoretical notions, and the instructor will explain what you need to do in the briefings. It is also the right approach that a student starts flying right away to see if actually being at the controls of a plane is what he expected. So, if the theoretical course starts in September, but during the summer you want to fly a few hours before signing up permanently, nothing prevents you from doing so. But remember not to overdo it when dividing the two activities. Summary. The entire course, i.e. the 4 months of theoretical course, the technical times to book the exam, to conclude the practical part, to take the final exam and to request the insurance of the license, lasts about 8 months. Didactically, it is difficult to compress it unless you already have extensive aeronautical knowledge. Even the exaggerated dilution should be considered, because taking 3 years, for example, would mean doing an hour of flight every 3 weeks, and so you would not be able to acquire and maintain manual skills, and consequently, it could take many more hours than the expected 45. The ideal programming time, even for your financial planning of the hours you will have to pay, is between 8 months and a year and a half. Once you've obtained the license, you will be able to fly, respecting what we said in the previous tutorial, bringing friends and relatives, or enjoying the magic of flying alone. So, what types of aircraft can you fly? The course always takes place on an SEP, a single-engine piston aircraft, which is a class of aeroplanes. That is, all single piston engines are included, as the name implies. But if you took the course on the Cessna 150, to fly the Cessna 172 or the Piper PA-28, you will have to do a separate course, which will briefly consist partly in the classroom to study the flight manual, the characteristic speeds and the particularities of the vehicle, and partly regarding flight, which, depending on the complexity and the diversity of the planes you will have flown up to that point, will be more or less consistent. If, on the other hand, you want to fly twin-engine or turbine-powered aircraft, you will need to undertake a new rating, as we will explain in the next tutorials. Licenses issued after 2014 have value throughout the European Union, plus other neighbouring countries that have adhered to European standards in the aviation sector and never expire. It is an acquired qualification, such as a diploma or degree. Of course, if you don't fly for a while, you will need to go back to a flight school and fly with an instructor before you can fly on your own again. Let's talk about costs. Most of the amount of the course is related to flight hours, so doing all the practical activity on a P92 or a Cessna 150 or a Cessna 172 can change the total considerably. We can anticipate that the estimates range from approximately €12,000 to €15,000 depending on the vehicle used. Remember to ask the school which costs are included and excluded and by what means you will carry out your training. If you have any questions or curiosities, contact us at info@checkbeforeflight.com or refer to the definitions in Wiki Before Flight. Happy landings.